I'm Sean Mims, ServiceTrade's Vice President of Marketing. So I started in this industry over 14 years ago as a technician in the field, and for the past 12 years, I've been part of the ServiceTrade team creating solutions and data-driven strategies that have helped over 1,300 commercial and industrial contractors grow their businesses. So joining me today from the ServiceTrade team is Jordan Winfield. Jordan, mind sharing a little about yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Jordan Winfield. I've been with ServiceTrade for a little over a year now, just helping connect people with their business issues within ServiceTrade. I partner very well with Sean in the marketing team to, deliver the best product.
Cool. Thanks, Jordan. So today we're super excited to share with you the latest version of the Fire and Life Safety Industry Benchmark Report that has some really interesting new insights. And it's going to break out all of these metrics, these benchmarks by company size, so small, mid-sized enterprise, so you can get a better sense of the benchmarks based on the size of your organization. First, a quick warning. This is your friendly reminder why it's so very important to rely on comparative industry benchmarks like those found in this report. Feelings fool and data rules. Repeatable scientific studies show us that it is human nature to feel like we are above average. And for our businesses, that can be extremely dangerous. That's how you get caught flat-footed in a competitive market like the fire and life safety industry. That's why you need to rely on data to guide your understanding of your business's performance. So speaking of data, this benchmark report was pulled together using an incredible wealth of information. Data from over 1,300 active ServiceTrade accounts was analyzed. These contractors have over 13 million assets under management in roughly 10% of the commercial and industrial facilities in the US, and invoiced for over $7.5 billion in revenue in the last 12 months. So for this report, the benchmarks you're going to see cover the time frame from August 1st of 2023 through July 31st of 2024. The first benchmark you'll see is year-over-year revenue growth. Note that this benchmark does look back into the trailing 12 months preceding the period for this report, since it's a year-over-year measure. So it does require full 2 years of data, so it backs all the way up to 2022, and that's to account for seasonality. Very often, fire protection and mechanical industry businesses have some revenue seasonality through the year, so we do a year-over-year comparison to kind of remove that as a factor. Next, you'll see on-time completion rate, which is the percentage of work orders and jobs where your last appointment, where a tech was on site, was in the defined due window. So generally, this is a good measure of how well you are meeting your internal and customer SLAs, whether it's tight turnaround for a service call or emergency service call, or something broader like a month-long due window for an inspection. Next benchmark you'll see is pull-through work rate, which is a measure of your ability to pull work through like deficiency repairs, retrofits from existing customer relationships and contracts. And finally, days to invoice, which is the number of days between your last appointment and the first invoice. So this is a good measure of how buttoned up your company is when it comes to closing out work and getting the bill out the door. Now, before I show you, what is arguably the most important benchmark of all, year-over-year revenue growth, let me kind of orient you as to how the data will be presented so that you can find the benchmark data points that matter to you most. So for each benchmark, you'll see a table like this. On the left side, you'll see your company's size based on number of service technicians. Small business category represents organizations in the range of 1 to 10 service techs. Mid-sized organizations go up to around 25 techs, and enterprise organizations cover from 25 up to hundreds of technicians. At the bottom, where it says total, you'll see kind of the industry total that aggregates all organizational sizes and represents kind of a total view of the market regardless of company size. At the top of the table, you'll find performance levels that correspond to the bottom and top quartiles, and in the middle, the median. So if your company is performing at or above the value in the middle, that median, that means that you're performing better than 50% of the other companies in your industry. If your company is performing at or above the value on the right column, that means that you are a top performer and doing better than 75% of the other companies in your industry. So let's look at the data. Pause here to let you kind of consume. It's a lot all at once. Highlight here. On average, we see that the fire protection contractors using ServiceTrade are growing their revenue around 15% here, at the bottom, year over year, which is incredible, right? What's amazing is that top performers are growing revenue over 33%, despite the skilled labor shortage plaguing this industry. So this begs the question, what the hell are these companies doing to grow so quickly despite a lot of macroeconomic headwinds? I mean, these companies are growing well over 2 times faster than the median because of how they operate. And this bar chart over here on the right, which is just a different view of the same total market data we saw, really puts that into perspective.
Sean, can I pop in with a very popular question as you are going through this? People are wondering how revenue growth is impacted by acquisitions and how we handle that in this study.
Oh, that's a great question. And it is included. And that's one. So acquisitions do count as revenue growth. And generally, I think that's why we see enterprise, the median for enterprise companies up a little higher than others, is there's a little bit more acquisition growth stacked in here compared to the small and mid-sized categories. But I still think, based on this data, there's plenty of opportunity for small and mid-sized businesses to grow pretty quickly, seeing that the top quartile, that top performers in the small space, are growing as quickly as some enterprise. Now, a little easier to grow when you're smaller, 10 techs versus 100 techs, but you get the idea. So what does the data tell us about how these companies operate that helps them grow so quickly? First, these companies, these top performers that are growing very quickly, prioritize value over volume. In other words, instead of focusing on work orders and invoices and a quantity of those per day, they prioritize dollars per day to ensure that every tech generates as much revenue as possible. Next, these companies just do more proactive repair work. This one is pretty simple and came out very clearly in the data. More repair work is correlated with faster growth, period. Finally, the fastest growing companies have more cash to invest in growing the business because they have faster customer-friendly billing processes and therefore collect more quickly. So I'm going to dive into each one of these, right? Value over volume, more proactive repairs, and accelerating cash flow more deeply with each of the benchmarks, starting with on-time completion rate, which again is a measure of the percent of work orders, inspections, repairs, service calls that were completed when they were due. The median across the entire industry is right around 78%. So 78 out of 100 work orders are getting completed when they are due. To be clear, when I mean completed, I mean the last appointment is in the due window, not necessarily the closeout of the job. Top performers were typically in the high 80s. Now, interesting word of caution here. Above a certain point, the data shows that improving your on-time rate is actually counterproductive. More specifically, companies with an on-time rate between 60 and 90% grew 1 times faster than companies that fell outside that range. So it's sort of this Goldilocks zone. And there's a couple reasons for this, right? First, companies that can get to the vast majority of their work and therefore have a very high on-time completion rate over 90% probably just don't have enough high-value work to keep their techs busy and productive. And then companies below that 60% on-time completion rate just aren't getting to nearly enough work and are losing clients due to the poor customer service. Now, look, 69% is a huge range that includes those quartile thresholds, right? Bottom performers is above 60%, and top performers are still below at those threshold marks. But there's still a lot of companies that fall outside of that range. And the data shows us that it's very clear that how important it is to optimize on time rate as opposed to trying to overachieve in this measure. To do this, there are some very clear actions your companies can take. So first, and this should be pretty obvious, it's critical that you fully utilize your most scarce resource, your technicians. Next, and more importantly, the work for those techs should be prioritized by revenue or value over volume. And finally, to ensure that your team is doing a good job in prioritizing work based on revenue, they should target and should be managed to dollars per day goals. To show you exactly how to do this, I'm going to pass it over to Jordan to show you some of these best practices in ServiceTrade.
Thank you, Sean. So, how do we get a high on-time completion rate, and how do we continue to achieve those benchmarks that Sean has just talked about? Through our scheduling and dispatching board, there's several ways. The first thing that we're going to talk about is cutting down that windshield time. As you can see during this map view, there's a lot of different jobs. Being able to know when incoming jobs are coming in to fully utilize your technicians is very important. So if I have a job that's right here on Fayetteville Street with 12, and I know there's an upcoming job right here off East Arrogate Street, it makes sense to see, hey, which technicians are in the area, so I'm able to send them accordingly to that work order for that to be fulfilled. The other ways of doing this is through our filters that our customers do love, and one of the things you can do. But let me preface, as we talked about that value over volume, being able to have your estimated price for your work orders is very critical. Why is that critical? Because one of the features within here is we want to show estimated price. Being able to see your high dollar values allows you to get to those quickly by prioritizing them effectively. The other way of doing that is through tags. As you know, you may have your tier A tags, tier B, or level 1, level 2. They may not necessarily be your high volume when it comes to dollars, but they're your high priority when it comes to customers and value. This is another way to quickly, as a dispatcher or scheduler, to look at those efficiently and making sure we are completing them on time with the proper technicians to continue to keep that positive on-time completion. And
Yeah,
finally,
if you don't mind me jumping in there, Jordan, this is where you can make it real easy for your schedulers, coordinators, dispatchers, setting them up for success by having them be able to take those hundreds or thousands or even tens of thousands of inspections and quickly narrow them down to show me my tier A customers and let me see the jobs with high revenue. Get those scheduled first. Next, tier A customers with mid-level revenue. All right, let's go to tier B customers with high revenue, and giving them a very clear process that breaks that out into much more bite-sized chunks that also prioritize revenue.
thank you. And finally, we all know about the skilled labor shortage and making sure we are utilizing our techs effectively. What you're viewing now is our capacity tracker. And this lets you know, based on the amount of hours that you set per technician for all of your technicians for the week, total of 56, I get a percentage 44 over 56, letting me know, am I within the threshold of utilizing my technicians efficiently? As you can kind of see, the bright red means there is something wrong. We are overutilizing them or underutilizing them. You want to be around this gray or black color. That lets you know, hey, we're doing the proper things. They're getting to the appropriate jobs. But this also helps when it comes to emergency work and being able to appropriately find a technician with availability without burning them out or overutilizing somebody else. I am now going to pass it back to Sean so he can talk about managing your dollars in a little deeper dive.
Thanks. Yeah, and just to kind of stack on, when you can prioritize work by estimated revenue, you can start to report on that to understand how much revenue do we have scheduled for this week down to the division or office level. In this table here in this report, we can see a more granular view of this and deep dive into any division to understand what's happening at the per tech or per coordinator level and understand what revenue targets are we hitting? Where are we behind? Again, are we hitting the right number of hours? What's going on with Emily Clark here? Why is she at half our target? Well, it's probably because she only has 5 hours scheduled. So we can really manage this at a very granular level to ensure that we're hitting our dollars per day goals. And then we can take a look at actuals. Let's see how we did last week. How did each division perform? At a more detailed level in this table, we can see what was our actual, but also our actual versus our estimated. And if we dive in at the per tech or per coordinator level, we can start to understand, are we hitting our numbers? Where were we off? Why were we off? Where should we dig in deeper to understand how we can improve our business so we can maintain that high level of revenue productivity? We can ensure that techs spend as much time on site as they were supposed to. You know, we've got this target here in this line at around 36 hours. Rachel's crushing it, putting in 50 hours of on-site time. And then the not so fun metric, our windshield time. Understand what's going on. We expect to only hit a 15% windshield time target in any given week. What's going on with Division 4 here? Let's start to drill in and see what's going on. And drill down to see on the per tech basis, what's happening with Jessica here? How is she spending almost 1/3 of her time on the road? Something is going on here that we need to dig into deeper to understand what's happening and why we're spending so much time having our techs drive around. Okay. So, before I move on here to our next benchmark, seeing a lot of chatter in the comments. I'm going to get to this at the end. The question is whether or not ServiceTrade customers can get a view of how their company is performing compared to these benchmarks. And the answer is yes, with an account health review. And I'll talk about that here at the end of after I walk through the benchmarks. So we'll get there in a second. So moving on to this next benchmark, pull-through work rate. Note that the numbers that I'm going to show you today are based on quantity, not revenue as a percent basis. So this is a percent of total work orders that for repair and retrofit type work that comes from existing relationships. It is a percentage based on quantity of work orders, not on revenue. So with that context in mind, the median pull-through rate is right around 13%. That means that for the median fire protection contractor using ServiceTrade, 13% of their work is repair work or kind of retrofit install that was pull-through from existing customer relationships. And that's 13% on a quantity basis. I would expect the revenue basis to be higher. And our top performers over here are pulling through around 20%, depending on that company size. So top performers are pulling through about 50% more work than the median and about 3 times as much as the bottom performers. And what the data tells us is that fire protection contractors that are above that median pull-through rate of around 13% are growing 2 times faster than their peers. And the top performers are growing even faster than that. There is an incredibly, incredibly strong correlation between growth and pull-through rate for fire protection contractors. And the data shows us that there are a few key actions you can take to boost your company's pull-through rate. Contractors that identify more deficiencies earn more pull-through rate. This seems so incredibly obvious on the face of it, but there really is a challenge here in terms of operationalizing it in a way that makes it super easy for techs to report the deficiencies out in the field in a way that makes it back to the office in a way that's really easy to act on. Next, companies that can turn quotes around faster win more repair work. Generally, the advice here is to try and turn your deficiency repair quotes around in less than 24 to 48 hours. And finally, you've got to make it easy for the customer to say yes. What do I mean by that? Well, data shows that you can significantly increase your quote approval rates if you include 3 to 5 attachments like pictures or videos so that your customer understands the importance of the work you're trying to deliver. If you follow up with the customer up to 15 times so they don't forget. And finally, giving your customers a really, really easy way to approve the quote online with a click of a button. So to show you exactly how to do this, I'm going to pass it over to Jordan again to show you some of these best practices in ServiceTrade.
Thank you. So before we actually dive into the ultimate of having that pull through work, I do want to kind of set this up. We are in the inspection manager mobile application for our fire and life safety customers and how you collect that data. So we're going to walk through, they receive their work order, and we're going to ultimately collect a deficiency that was found. But what you're going to quickly see is we made this very seamless for your technicians to come out here with information being pre-populated onto the app. They're able to dive into that specific asset, which would be the wet system, and just go through your questions of answering to make sure you're staying compliant within code. But for any reason, there may come to a point where something is wrong. Maybe their sprinkler head is corroded that you're going to see. Technicians can quickly go ahead and add that photo into this report that you can now report on and send it to the proper authorities. But again, as Sean mentioned, we want to make sure we have 3 to 5. So when we send this quote off to the customer, they understand, okay, this is what needs to be. We want to get that approval rate up, but we also want to get these quotes out pretty fast. And so again, we can go through here. So kind of jumping into our dashboard that is coming soon, you can quickly see a tile of open deficiencies. So as somebody who's handling this quoting process or reporting on these repairs that are incoming, I'm quickly see as my ticker goes up, I can now do an action plan of knowing, hey, what do I need to go through first? What do I need to find? So this is a great landing page that's coming soon. That's going to give you a lot of analytics depending on your day.
Yeah, I'll call out if you don't mind backing up to that, Jordan. Super exciting. This new dashboard coming soon enables you to set up your dashboard with the widgets that matter to you. And if you're a person who cares about quoting deficiencies, you'll see how many open deficiencies there are that you need to go focus on. So
coming in, so quoting, as we talked about, how quickly can we get these turned around and how effectively? The goal is 24 to 48 hours. And the way that we do that here in ServiceTrade is very simple. It's using quote templates. So right now it's very blank. There's not much here. The only thing you do see is the service of the deficiency that we found and the photos that were attached. But now I need to give this some substance. With the click of a couple buttons, I have my template with the proper labor and parts that's needed. Quickly add that in, and then as you see, I now have that description. Parts are always included. From here, we now actually need to send this off to the customer because they need to view it. I'm going to send it off, quickly add the attachment, and I can hit preview. As you see here, this is a very clean but quick way to get these quotes out efficiently by having the description of work with the proper wet sprinkler system, which will be the deficiencies that we found, and the pictures and attachments. And mind you, they don't just have to be pictures. They can be a picture, a video, and a voice memo if you want to apply that information to your customer. But again, the goal is making sure we have these 3 to 5 attachments, and this will allow you to get this out immediately to where your customer can approve this via electronically with an apply. And now I'll pass it back to Sean, and he'll go into a little bit more depth on how to do that.
thank you, Jordan. Yep. And before I show you this boost revenue and margin dashboard that's designed to help you do many things, but especially optimize that deficiency repair quote pipeline, it's important to call out if you're a ServiceTrade customer and you're not using the quote auto reminder feature, you should definitely be using that to just automate some of that quote follow-up. You can also resend quotes in bulk from the list view. And so for all of those quotes that customers haven't responded to from the previous month, just follow up with all of them at once, and you'll just see the dollars trickle in. So boost revenue and margin, business analytics dashboard here, pulling in all of your data from ServiceTrade. So you can look at high level information about breakout of revenue over the last 12 months by work order type, or see trends over time. But starting to get into seeing those biggest open deals by customer, and looking at your deficiency quote pipeline. So it relates to, how frequently are you finding repair opportunities or deficiencies on work orders? 32%. How many of those deficiencies are actually getting converted into quotes? Only 12%. That seems awfully low. Quote approval rate. What rate are customers actually approving the quotes that you do send? 76.6%. That's actually a bit high. That's great. Except you should probably be sending more. You should send more until you wouldn't expect a high quote approval rate. Likely means that you're just not sending enough quotes that the customers are saying no to. Fewer chances at bat. Moving on to our quote pipeline, getting details. Now, this is anonymized data, but you can imagine your salespeople showing up and understanding how many quotes they are managing, how many are submitted or in draft state or have been accepted by the customer. Down here on the right, we can see for how many deficiencies are being reported by each of our techs to understand who's finding the most deficiencies, and we can dig into what are they doing so well. And the folks on the bottom, why aren't they finding deficiencies? How can we train them to improve that their ability to identify and report those? And some more fun stuff at the bottom of this dashboard, including revenue distribution and density by customer, where each block here represents a customer. The size of the square represents the amount of revenue coming from that customer. And the color of the depth of orange represents our margin. So if we look at this big customer and try and figure out, wow, there's quite a bit of revenue coming from this one large customer with decent margins, let's dig in and filter this dashboard to just look at this one customer's stats and understand, wow, we find deficiencies more frequently on work orders for that customer. That's probably a reason why we have higher revenue with this customer. So just a little bit of, sorry, didn't mean to stop sharing. Let me pull that back up if I can find my screen here. Just wanted to put a little cherry on top of what Jordan showed in terms of operationally, how to manage that deficiency to quote workflow, with that overview of how you can maintain high level visibility to ensure that there aren't any points in that process that are blocking you and lowering your overall volume so you can manage it completely. All right. On to our final benchmark here, days to invoice, which is a measure of calendar days between the last appointment on the work order to the date of the first invoice. Note that this is not a measure of how long it takes to collect from your customers. This is simply a measure of how long it takes to get the bill out the door. So you can see here, median is around 5 days. I'll pause here so you can kind of absorb this information and find your company size benchmarks. Now, depending on company size, top performers are getting invoices out anywhere from 1.5 to 3 days. It's important to note here that beyond the cash flow impact of improving days to invoice, generally this is a pretty good measure of overall billing efficiency. We've seen that companies that have a faster billing process typically have lower administrative costs associated with billing because they have better systems in place. Now, there was an unfortunate trend we noticed in the data. On average, compared to last year, commercial contractors are billing around 20% slower. So it's taken about an extra day on average for contractors to get bills out the door. And there are a lot of macroeconomic factors at play, making it more difficult for you to get invoiced out the door quickly. And that hurts your cash flow. But there are some actions you can take to beat the trend. First, you should pre-bill wherever possible, especially for proactive work like inspection and planned repairs. Not so easy with service calls, but when you know what the scope of the work is going to be, you should pre-bill for it. Second, in order to really streamline your billing processes, it is critical that you automate your pricing contracts in a way that doesn't require your billers to reference some price book, whether it's physical and sitting on their desk next to them or some digital one. This should be automated. Finally, you should prioritize value over volume, again, by invoicing your highest revenue work first. Now, that won't necessarily improve your days to invoice, but it will boost your cash flow. So again, to show you how you can optimize your billing processes, I'm going to pass it over to Jordan to show you some of these best practices in ServiceTrade.
All right. So we've kind of got to the point where I think we all love is we've completed the work and then we want to collect our revenue from what we've done. And ServiceTrades make this very easy. So as you see here, we're just completing a job description, work order with the attachments. Now we're going to go ahead and invoice. So as Sean was mentioning, we've done everything up to this point, making sure we prioritize our revenue, maybe using our tags and understanding our customers. We've, increased cash flow with doing our pull-through rate with certain people and getting those quotes out efficiently between 24 to 48 hours. At this point, now we're going to make sure not only our pricing is good, so we can invoice utilizing our automatic pricing contracts, which helps with those markup rules, making sure you're hitting your margins. And we just want to make sure we have everything collected. From here, we're down going to make sure that we've done the days to invoice, but now we want to increase potentially the days to collect. And this is where that comes into play. By creating an invoice with the 3 items, we're going to go ahead and load in. Looks very similar to the quote, but we're in the invoicing side where I have my invoice, the level of details that we're going to have. I'm able to change, make sure our tax codes are in place, make sure we have the proper contracts, again, approve before we actually send this off. Once we verified, we see our kind of estimated gross margin. I can go ahead and preview. This is what your customers are going to be looking at to pay. You have your logo, you have your information, and if you notice up here, at this top, there's this Pay Now button. Very simply, they can pay within ServiceTrade via credit card or ACH. However you want to set that up, and you can set limits up to make that appropriate, but they have that ability to do that. But the call that I want to talk about is that bright blue link that says go to service details, because you're trying to figure out why is that. And again, we want to make it easy for them to say yes to that green button. And everybody wants to know why is the dollar amount the dollar amount. So by diving into this, I'm able to see what we call our service link and our service details. This is something that you can send to your customers ahead of time or at the time of invoice, because it will be attached to the link that lets them know what has been completed from the appointment to the services, maybe the parts and things that we found that we had to use, or that deficiency that was logged earlier during our inspection earlier, and the reason why that quote came out. It just tells that story to the customer of understanding, hey, this is the work we've presented, this is the work we've done, and it's even a live timeline document that as the technician is updating their things through the inspection, you or whoever has access to this link will start to view those information and get those alerts as they're ongoing. So that is how we collect in short of your days invoice within ServiceTrade. And I'll pass it back to Sean.
Thanks, sir. All right. Let me move this out of my way. So if you want to grow as fast as the top performing contractors in your market, over 33% year over year or faster, the data in this benchmark study shows us that there are a few key actions your company can take. First, schedule value over volume. Hit that Goldilocks zone, very large Goldilocks zone of 60 to 90% on-time completion rate to grow 1.5 times faster by targeting those daily revenue goals to maximize productivity of each of your technicians. Next, pull through more than 13.
We do not, if you're talking, we do not see your screen if you're showing like.
Oh, Shelly, are you seeing my screen?
I do.
All right, continue.
Okay. All right. Well, I hope everyone else can see my screen. Yeah, so hit that Goldilocks zone, 60, 90%, schedule value over volume, pull through more than 13% of your work orders as repair work to grow 2 times faster by streamlining your whole process from reporting deficiencies to creating the repair quotes to getting those quotes out to the customers and managing that entire pipeline. And finally, speed up your billing process to reduce days to invoice to generate more cash flow for growth investments by automating as much of your billing process as possible, especially when it comes to those pricing contracts. So I know this has been a lot of information. So what should you do next? Well, first, check your email tomorrow. So in it, you're going to find a recording of this webinar and a link to a PDF version of the benchmark report you can share with your team and kind of get the conversation going. Next, you should compare your company's data to the benchmarks to find your biggest opportunities for improvement, right? You may, for example, find that your days to invoice, it's just fine, but that you're way below the benchmark on deficiency repair pull-through. And that should be a clear sign that that's your focused area of action. Now, pulling all of this data together can be daunting. So if you're a ServiceTrade customer, remember we hinted about this earlier, your ServiceTrade account manager can walk you through an account health review with a dashboard like this that pulls your data in and compares it to the benchmarks. From there, they can deep dive into any of the underlying performance metrics that feed up into these. So if you want to go in and look at what's going on with our pull-through rate, what's going on with our job on time completion rate, there are individual dashboards they can dive into to go really in depth with you about what's going on in your account and how that compares to others. All right, so at this point, we'll try and answer some of the questions. And I saw some really good ones coming in while Jordan was presenting there. Let me see if I can pull those up.
Let me see if I can help you out, Sean, because I've been saving some away. One question, and I'm going to say it maybe differently than this person was typing it, but what the heck is the lag between a technician finishing a job and the invoice getting out the door?
Yeah. That's the one I wanted to answer because there's a really good big answer here, I think. Okay, there's two schools of thought, right? Have techs invoice in the field or have the office invoice. And I think for some folks, it's sort of this philosophical thing in the world. And I have an opinion on this, that many companies try to have their techs billing out in the field. Generally speaking, and this is kind of confirmed in data when we compare companies that do this versus those that don't, having your techs doing administrative work in the field and invoicing in the field is a bad use of their time because they are your most scarce resource. And you need to keep them as productive as possible on the actual work. And that's what they want to do, right? They want to be doing great work with their hands and keeping people safe in these facilities. And so they just don't even want to be billing in the first place. So if that question comes from a place of a company that has their techs billing in the field, then yeah, it makes no sense. Why would there be any lag? It should be immediate because we put the bill in their hand before we walk out the door. So that's part of the answer. The other is, if you don't have your techs bill in the field, which generally I recommend, and we've seen far more success in companies that follow that philosophy, it just often tends to be a lot of follow-up on what happened in the field because there aren't really crisp processes and training in place that ensure that all of the necessary data is captured in the field about what happened so they can accurately bill. And then there just aren't, pricing contracts set up. There's just a whole lot of work to get the bill out the door, and almost every single work order requires a call to the tech and a call to someone's service manager about asking about special pricing. So those stack up, and you see folks on that list. I don't remember what the low numbers were, but some of the benchmarks are as low as 12, 15 days to get a bill out the door, which is just wild to me. So I hope that answered your question.
I'm listening if you have follow-ups. I have a couple questions in the invoicing section. One that they're all good questions. Another great question. Jordan, what if a customer hasn't paid, has a balance on the account? Are there notifications or alerts to halt service so we don't keep spending good time after bad?
Yes, you absolutely can. You can utilize the comment section to make sure before you are actually going out to complete another work and they do have a bill that's unpaid, you can let them know, and that will alert the office to be like, hey, you need to collect before we can come out there. So that is one way you can do that through the comment section.
There's also an on-hold flag. So there's an explicit on-hold flag that some companies have automated with connections to their accounting system that will show up in all of the places, it's scheduling, dispatch, and stuff, so that like, don't touch this customer. And you can use that for a number of things, whether it's they're behind on payments or they just weren't nice to your people and they're on hold. They're in timeout.
A reporting question. Someone is asking about the ability to show sale percentages and cost breakdowns. Is that maybe a different dashboard, or where would we find that, Sean?
Oh yeah, I mean, great thing about the business analytic capabilities in ServiceTrade. I kind of showed a couple. The Boost Revenue Dashboard is kind of one of those out of the box. Here we can set that up for you so you can rock and roll. There are a whole host of these kind of out of the box dashboards, but then you can slice and dice the data just about any way you want. And so if the data the structure is there, which for profitability it is, then yay, verily, you can proceed. As it relates to sales percentages, I don't know if that's a question about commission. That's a bit more in the realm of our sales manager products, so which we didn't demo today or show any of today.
Our time always goes so quickly. The last question I'm going to pose to you, there was a lot of interest in the technician capacity planner. So can you explain where that is in the application and just a little bit, Jordan, you gave a great overview of it. If there's anything you could kind of elaborate on that new capability.
Yes, so the capacity tracker is in the dispatching and scheduling section within ServiceTrade application. And I did see, of course, like, how do we get that data? Where that's coming from? So that's coming from through our service opportunities. When you're setting up these reoccurring services and you're adding these technicians to those jobs that are upcoming, you're able to kind of see ahead of time, but also at that moment, what's available, meaning what's their capacity in itself. And it just, again, it allows your dispatcher or scheduler to really see who's available, but also, again, tying in that volume over volume, you can attach certain criteria there to allow you to see and a little in depth to knowing, are we utilizing our technicians correctly and appropriately?
And I'll pile in just a little bit more to specifically to help ServiceTrade customers navigate there. If you go to the new schedule view at the bottom and you go to the monthly, because there's a daily, weekly, monthly view. If you go to the monthly view, you'll see an extra toggle option that lets you toggle into that capacity view, which is available to our enterprise customers. So if you're on Selector Premium, you won't see that toggle option there. Similarly, the business analytics capabilities that I showed today, the dashboards, those are available at our enterprise level.
Okay. Guys, thank you for the review. I want to remind everyone that we have an email coming to you tomorrow. It has the recording, so you can go through and relive your favorite moments. And also get a copy of the report so you can actually sit down with your data and compare. If you are a ServiceTrade customer, your account manager can schedule this account health review. I have a feeling you'll be hearing from them within a couple days as well if you're here today. And just take a look at your own data and look for those opportunities where you might be performing lower than you wish to be. We know this is a competitive game. We know you people, you love to be on top, and we'd love to help you get there. So thank you, Sean. Thank you, Jordan. You both did a fantastic job. Thank you for telling us a great story today.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We know it was a lot of time, and we really appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.